14:05 Zulu time, July 10th, 1948. Tempelhof Airport, Berlin. The air is thick with coal dust and the pulverized flour that leaks from stressed burlap sacks. The drone of C-54 Skymasters is constant, a mechanical heartbeat for a city on the verge of starvation. This is not war, as First Lieutenant Gail Halvorsen was trained for. This is logistics. This is tonnage. This is survival. His Skymaster, call sign Vittles 77, taxis toward the offloading ramp, its 4 Pratt & Whitney engines cooling in the humid summer air. Halvorsen, a 27-year-old pilot from Utah, unbuckles and runs through the post-flight checklist. He is a transport pilot, a link in the chain of Operation Vittles, the Allied response to the Soviet blockade. The mission is simple: feed 2. 5 million people trapped in the western sectors of the city. There is no room for sentiment. Every flight manifest, every fuel calculation, every landing window is measured against the city's grim metabolism. He steps from the hard stand, stretching his legs, and walks toward the perimeter fence. Beyond the barbed wire, a small group of children gathers. They are silent. This is what unnerves him. They are not like the children in Italy or North Africa who would swarm transport crews begging for chocolate or gum. These German children, the children of the recent enemy, just stand and watch. Their faces are pale, their clothes worn, but their discipline is absolute. They watch the Skymasters land and take off, the sound of the engines the only promise of tomorrow. Halvorsen approaches the fence. He is not supposed to interact. The blockade is tense. Soviet fighters often buzz the air corridors, but he cannot turn away from the silence. He fumbles in the pockets of his flight suit. He finds nothing. No chocolate, no rations, just 2 sticks of Wrigley's double mint gum. It feels pathetic. An insufficient gesture against the backdrop of geopolitical starvation. He holds them out. He breaks the 2 sticks into 4 small pieces and passes them through the wire. He expects a sudden surge, a fight. Instead, the children who receive the pieces turn to the others. They tear the foil wrappers into tiny strips. The children who received nothing, who were too slow or too small, are handed these strips. They press the foil to their noses, just to smell the faint trace of peppermint. They are sharing the smell. Halvorsen stands frozen. He, a farm boy from Utah, armed with the greatest air transport fleet ever assembled, is watching children share the memory of a flavor. This quiet, desperate act of dignity shatters his operational detachment. He turns and walks back to his aircraft, the thrum of the engines drowned out by a profound, personal silence. He climbs into the cockpit, his mind no longer on fuel mixtures or crosswinds. He is consumed by the image of the children and the foil. He flies back to Rhine-Main Air Base outside Frankfurt, the C-54, heavy with purpose but feeling empty. The 90-minute flight is a blur of checklists and radio chatter, but his thoughts are back at the Tempelhof fence. The 2 sticks of gum were an insult. He knew it. His flight engineer, Sergeant Herschel Elkins, notices the pilot's distraction. "Something wrong back there, Lieutenant?" Halvorsen just shakes his head, watching the Rhine River carve through the occupied territories below. That night in the barracks, he cannot sleep. The faces of the children are superimposed on his flight charts. He thinks about his cargo: 10 tons of coal, 10 tons of dried milk, 10 tons of flour. All of it vital, all of it grey, functional, joyless. It is sustenance, but it is not hope. The Soviet blockade is a siege of morale as much as a siege of logistics. The Red Army is waiting for the city to break, for the Americans to give up. They are waiting for the silence of the children to turn into the silence of surrender. He sits up on his cot. He is a cargo pilot. His job is to drop things. The children at the fence had stared at his aircraft with a kind of resigned awe. What if he dropped something for them? The thought is immediately followed by a wave of professional caution. It is strictly forbidden. Unauthorized drops are a court-martial offense. The air corridors are precise. Any deviation, any unlogged cargo, is a violation of protocol. General William H. Tunner, the commander of the airlift, is a logistics genius known for his absolute intolerance of inefficiency. Dropping candy is the definition of inefficient, but the image of the foil wrappers returns. He remembers his own childhood, the simple joy of a piece of candy. It was a small thing, a piece of normalcy. That is what those children lacked. They weren't just hungry for food. They were hungry for a sign that someone cared, that the world was not entirely made of barbed wire and rubble. He gets up and walks to the small post exchange on the base. He buys all the chocolate bars and gum he can afford with his week's pay. What he didn't know was that this tiny, unauthorized act of rebellion would become the most powerful weapon of the Berlin airlift. The problem, as defined by the War Office and Allied Command, is one of cold mathematics. On June 24, 1948, the Soviet military administration issues its orders. All rail, road and canal traffic to West Berlin is severed. The city, an island of democracy deep inside the Soviet occupation zone, is cut off. The strategic goal of the Soviets is simple: force the Western Allies to abandon the city, thereby consolidating communist control over all of Germany. The numbers presented in emergency briefings at Tempelhof and Rhein-Main are stark. West Berlin houses 5 million civilians and 20,000 Allied occupation troops. To sustain life at a bare minimum, the city requires an estimated 500 tons of supplies every single day. Of that, 500 tons must be food, and 3,000 tons must be coal and liquid fuel for heat and power. The initial assessment is bleak. General Lucius D. Clay, the American military governor, sends a telegram to Washington that lays out the options. We have lost Berlin, or we stay. The decision is made to stay. The airlift begins. It is, at first, a failure. The aircraft available, primarily the C-47 Skytrain, the venerable Goonie bird of World War II, can only carry about 5 tons each. The math does not work. The city is starving. Field reports from the first week are grim. Daily tonnage delivered, 90 tons. Required, 500. The operation is chaos. Flights are uncoordinated. Maintenance is a nightmare. The Soviets jam radio frequencies and send Yakovlev fighters into the corridors to harass the transports. This is where General Tunner arrives. He is not a combat leader. He is a master of logistics, the man who ran the hump airlift over the Himalayas in WPs. He imposes a ruthless, factory-like precision. He replaces the C-47s with the far larger C-54 Skymasters, each capable of carrying 10 tons. He dictates every second of the operation. Pilots will not leave their aircraft upon landing. They are to hand their manifest to a ground crew, receive a weather briefing and a candy bar from a mobile snack cart, and be ready for takeoff as soon as the 10 tons of cargo are unloaded by German crews. The turnaround time is cut from over an hour to just 30 minutes. The sky over Berlin becomes a conveyor belt. A plane lands every 3 minutes. Soon it is every 90 seconds. The noise is continuous, a 24-hour roar that Berliners come to call the sound of freedom. But it is a brutal mechanical process. The pilots are pushed to the limit, flying 3 round trips a day in fog, ice, and rain. The aircraft are run ragged. The mission is tonnage and tonnage alone. In this high-stakes equation of survival, there is no variable for humanity. 4,500 tons is a statistic. In Berlin, it is the line between life and death. The hunger winter of 1947 is a fresh, agonizing memory. The city is a landscape of skeletons, its grand avenues reduced to rubble-strewn canyons. The human cost of the blockade is measured in calories. The official ration is cut to 500 calories per day, a slow starvation level. Electricity is available for only 4 hours. The subways cease to run. The psychological toll is just as severe. The Soviets blast propaganda from loudspeakers into the western sectors, promising warm meals and security to anyone who defects. The Berliners, who only 3 years prior were the enemy, are now the West's most crucial allies, and they are exhausted. Morale is the city's last defense. When the C-54s first arrive, their drone is terrifying. It is the sound of the bombers that destroyed their world. Now it is the only sound that matters. A diary entry from a Berlin resident, Hannelore Schmidt, dated August 1948. We listen for the planes. If the sound stops for more than an hour, a panic begins in the apartment block. We do not talk of hunger, we talk of the tonnage. We ask, did the Americans make the quota today? We're surviving on flour and dried potatoes, but worse is the cold and the dark. The planes are our only light. The pilots feel the pressure. They are not flying combat missions, but the risk is immense. The 3 air corridors, each only 20 miles wide, are unforgiving. A slight navigation error could mean straying into Soviet-controlled airspace and being forced down. The weather is the true enemy. Berlin fog is legendary. Pilots must land C-54s, loaded with 10 tons of coal in near-zero visibility, using only ground-controlled approach radar. Crashes happen, men die. They are not shot down, but they are casualties of the tonnage war. The official position is one of grim necessity. This is a technical problem, not a human one. The experts agreed. Sustaining a modern metropolis by air through a winter was impossible. It couldn't be done. This was the brink of World War III, fought not with bullets but with flour and coal. The ingenuity required was staggering. If the logistics of history fascinate you, stay with us. The story of the airlift is just beginning. Gale S. Halverson is not a natural-born rebel. He is a product of the American heartland, born in Salt Lake City in 1920 and raised on small farms in Utah and Idaho. His early life is defined by hard work, mechanical aptitude, and the quiet, steady principles of his faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He learns to fly through the civilian pilot training program and joins the Army Air Corps in 1942. He is a transport pilot, through and through. During World War II, he ferries bombers and fighters across the South Atlantic theater. He does not see aerial combat. He is not a fighter ace. He is a delivery man, a master of the complex, unglamorous work of moving materiel from point A to point B. His personality reflects this. He is methodical, calm, and deeply empathetic, a stark contrast to the hard-charging combat pilots. When he is assigned to the Berlin airlift, he carries the same conflicted feelings as many Americans. He was trained to view Germany as the enemy, the source of a global catastrophe. Yet his orders are now to save them. This moral pivot is difficult, but his background gives him a perspective many lack. He understands sustenance. He knows what a failed harvest looks like. He sees the Berliners not as defeated fascists, but as a population on the brink, much like a farm family facing a drought. His colleagues respect him. He is Hal, the quiet Mormon who doesn't drink or smoke, the pilot who meticulously checks his C-54 before every flight. He is not the man anyone would expect to break regulations, but the encounter at the fence has activated something deeper than his military discipline. It has engaged his sense of human duty. The children smelling the wrappers was not just a sad image. It was an offense against decency, a sign that the machinery of the airlift, for all its technical brilliance, was missing its soul. Back in his quarters at Rhine, Maine, Halvorsen recruits his co-pilot, Captain John E. Pickering, and his flight engineer, Sergeant Herschel Elkins. He lays out his plan. It is simple. He has his candy rations, and he has bought more. They will tie the candy to parachutes and drop them from the aircraft just before landing at Tempelhof. Pickering is skeptical. "Gale, are you nuts? We're flying 10-ton loads. General Tunner will have our hides if he finds out we're running an unauthorized candy delivery service. We could be court-martialed." "It's just a few bars of chocolate, John," Halvorsen replies, his voice low. "Did you see those kids? They had nothing. We're dropping flour. The Russians are dropping propaganda. We can drop hope." The argument is persuasive. The crazy idea takes root. The immediate problem is technical. They cannot just throw loose candy bars from a C-54 moving at 110 knots. They could hit someone, or the candy would be destroyed on impact. They need parachutes. Halvorsen looks around the room. His eyes land on his footlocker. He pulls out 3 handkerchiefs. This is the prototype. The 3 men sit on their cots, surrounded by flight maps and technical manuals, transformed into a miniature assembly line. They use their ration-issue string. They tie the corners of the handkerchiefs, creating small, functional parachutes. They secure 1 chocolate bar or a pack of gum to each harness. It is a clandestine operation, performed after their grueling 14-hour shifts. They name it Operation Little Victuals. Halvorsen knows he cannot just drop them randomly. He needs to signal the children at the fence, the ones who had shared the wrappers. He remembers his childhood. When his parents would call him from the fields, he would wiggle the wings of his small E-2 Cub plane to let them know he'd heard them. He sends a message through a German friend who works on the Tempelhof ground crew. "Tell the children at the fence. Tell them to watch for the C-54 that wiggles its wings. That will be me. I will have something for them." The preparation is complete. 3 small bundles, perhaps 24 candy bars in total, are hidden in Halvorsen's flight bag. They are dwarfed by the massive 10-ton pallets of coal being loaded into the cargo bay of his Skymaster. The next morning, they take off from Rhine, Maine. The flight is tense, the crew is nervous. They are not just breaking regulations, they are, in a small way, hijacking a multi-million-dollar military operation for a purpose its commanders would never understand. As they begin their final approach into Tempelhof, the weather is clear. Halvorsen descends, lining up with the runway. He can see the airport complex, the bombed-out apartment buildings, and the small cluster of children gathered at the end of the runway, right where he left them. They are watching, waiting. "Now," Halvorsen says to his engineer. Elkins moves to the flare chute near the cockpit, a small opening used for signaling. He pushes the first bundle out. The 3 handkerchief parachutes catch the wind, blossoming against the grey Berlin sky. The crew holds its breath. This is the moment of truth. Will it work? Will the children see? Halvorsen looks down. The small figures below are no longer silent. They are jumping, waving, running toward the small, drifting packages. A cheer, too faint to be heard over the engines but visible in their bodies, erupts from the crowd. As the C-54 passes over them, Halvorsen banks the aircraft left, then right, then left again. He wiggles his wings. The promise is fulfilled. The children below wave frantically. Onkel Wackelflügel, Uncle Wiggly Wings, is born. He lands the plane, his heart pounding with adrenaline and relief. The German ground crews rush to unload the coal. No one seems to have noticed. He taxis, takes off, and flies back to Rhine-Main, the mission a success. Back in their quarters, the crew is ecstatic. They have breached the cold logistics of the blockade. They do it again and again. On each flight, they pool their rations. Other crews notice. The secret begins to spread. Soon, pilots from the 317th Troop Carrier Group are all donating their candy. Operation Little Victuals grows from 3 handkerchiefs to 30. The post-exchange at Rhine-Main sells out of chocolate. The number of children at the Tempelhof fence swells from 12 to hundreds, all watching the sky, waiting for the plane that wiggles. If stories like this fascinate you, stay with us. The next chapter of wartime innovation might surprise you. The operation cannot stay secret for long. Within 2 weeks, the inevitable happens. The first sign of trouble is the mail. Letters begin arriving at the Tempelhof Base Operations Office, dozens of them, then hundreds. They are written in careful, broken English and German. They are addressed not to a specific pilot, but to der Schokoladenflieger, the chocolate flyer, or most commonly, Onkel Wackelflügel, Uncle Wiggly Wings. A German newspaper reporter, investigating the strange daily gathering of children, sees the drop and publishes a small story. The story is picked up. Suddenly, Uncle Wiggly Wings is a media sensation. The base commanders are baffled. Lieutenant Gail Halvorsen is summoned to the office of Colonel James R. Horn, the commander of the C-54s at Tempelhof. The mood is not celebratory. He stands at attention, his flight cap in his hand. "Lieutenant," Horn begins, his voice flat, "we are receiving reports and mail about an unauthorized airdrop operation, an operation involving candy and wing wiggling." Halvorsen feels the blood drain from his face. This is it, the court-martial. "Yes, sir," he replies. "I'm responsible." "Dear," Horn gestures to a photograph on his desk, taken by the German reporter. It shows a C-54 on final approach and 3 small, perfect parachutes trailing behind it. "This is a serious breach of protocol, Halvorsen. You know the regulations on unlogged cargo." Before Halvorsen can defend himself, the phone on the colonel's desk rings. Horn picks it up. "Yes, General. Yes, sir. He's in my office right now." Horn listens, his expression unreadable. He hangs up the phone and looks at Halvorsen. "That was General Tunner, the airlift commander. He wants to see you. Now." Halvorsen is escorted to the office of Lieutenant General William H. Tunner. Tunner is a legend, a man known as Willie the Whip for his ruthless pursuit of logistical perfection. He does not tolerate deviations. Halvorsen enters the office. Tunner is standing by a window, watching his C-54s land, one every 90 seconds. "Lieutenant," Tunner says, not turning around. "You're the one dropping candy." "Yes, General," Halverson says, bracing himself. Tunner turns. He is holding one of the letters from a Berlin child. He does not look angry. He looks calculating. "The press is all over this. We have a mountain of mail. The Soviets are furious. They say we're dropping propaganda." He pauses, then smiles. "And they're absolutely right." Halverson is stunned. "Lieutenant, that's the best damned idea I've heard since this whole thing started," Tunner says. "We're not just fighting a logistics war, we're fighting a psychological one. You've given us a weapon the Soviets have no answer for. Morale, good job. Sir, this operation is no longer clandestine," Tunner declares. "It is now official. Operation Little Victuals is being expanded. I want every C-54 group participating. We are going to flood this city with candy." Halverson stands in shocked silence. He is not being court-martialed. He is being commended. "You're going to need more than your flight rations," Tunner says, picking up the phone again. "Get me a line to the States. I want to talk to the American Confectioners Association." The transition from a secret operation to a full-scale psychological campaign is immediate and overwhelming. The story explodes in the American press. It is the perfect narrative. A kind-hearted American pilot, the innocent children of a former enemy, and the simple goodness of a chocolate bar. Donations pour in. The American Confectioners Association, coordinated by the National Confectioners Association, gathers massive shipments. School children across America organize their own Little Victuals drives, tying their own handkerchiefs to candy bars and mailing them to the Air Force. The mail arriving at Rhine-Main is no longer letters from Berlin, it is packages for Berlin. Tons of them. The logistics of Little Victuals become their own operation. Pilots and ground crews, off-duty, spend hours sorting mountains of candy and fabricating parachutes from any cloth they can find. The small act of rebellion has become a new formal directive. The real test is the impact on Berlin. The effect is electric. The sound of a C-54 is no longer just the sound of coal. It is the sound of Onkel Wackelflügel. The drops become a daily ritual. The children of Berlin have a new hero. This small gesture does more to win the hearts and minds of the German people than any political speech or diplomatic maneuver. It is tangible proof that the Americans are not just occupiers, they are protectors, they are friends. Soviet propaganda, which had painted the Americans as warmongering capitalists, is suddenly rendered impotent. How can you demonize an army that drops chocolate from the sky? The silent children at the fence are silent no more. They are cheering, they are waving, and they are, for the first time since the war began, acting like children again. The airlift has found its soul. The legacy of Operation Little Victuals is immediate. On May 12, 1949, after 11 months and 1.5 million tons of supplies, the Soviet Union lifts the blockade. The siege is broken. The Berlin airlift is a staggering political and logistical victory. It has saved a city and prevented a war. But in the memory of the Berliners, the victory is symbolized not by the tons of coal, but by the 23 tons of candy dropped from handkerchief parachutes. The data is clear. 277, 569 flights delivered over 3 million tons of cargo. But Little Victuals changed the equation. It demonstrated that soft power, empathy, could be as decisive as industrial might. The operation fundamentally reshaped German-American relations for the next century. The children who waited at the fence, the Raisin bomber generation, grew up to become the staunchest allies of the United States in a new Cold War. Gail Halvorson becomes a global figure of goodwill. He is not forgotten. He's awarded the Congressional Gold Medal and Germany's highest civilian honor, the Federal Cross of Merit. He continues his Air Force career, but his life is forever defined by that moment at the fence. He remains humble, always redirecting the praise. "I wasn't the hero," he would say in interviews decades later. "The heroes were the Berliners. Their spirit, their refusal to surrender, that was the miracle." He returns to Berlin countless times, meeting the children, now grown adults, who still keep their tiny brittle handkerchief parachutes as treasured possessions. The long-term effects are profound. The Berlin airlift is the first major battle of the Cold War, and it is won without a shot being fired. It establishes the strategy of containment and the power of logistical and moral resolve. It also solidifies the creation of NATO. The image of the C-54, an instrument of war, transformed into a symbol of life and generosity, becomes a permanent fixture of 20th century history. The pilots, flying in terrible weather and under constant stress, proved that a determined Air Force could do the impossible. Gail Halvorson's innovation was not technical. He did not invent a new engine or a new radar. He repurposed the entire machine of the airlift for a new mission. He saw a human problem inside a technical one. The military is built on regulations, on standardization, on the suppression of individual impulse for the good of the unit. Halvorson's crazy idea was an act of defiance against that very system, proving that sometimes the most strategic act is the most human one. Today, the principles of Operation Little Victuals are doctrine. In modern humanitarian aid and disaster response, the delivery of comfort items, toys, candy, small luxuries, is understood to be as critical to morale and recovery as food and medicine. Military psychological operations, PSYOPs, focus on winning hearts and minds, a strategy crystallized by Halvorson's handkerchiefs. The lesson was learned. You cannot just feed a person, you must also feed their spirit. The great concrete ramps of Tempelhof Airport are quiet now, transformed into a public park. The C-54s are gone, but the fences where the children stood remain, a silent witness to the moment when 2 sticks of gum and a simple act of kindness broke a superpower's siege. The blockade was a test of engineering, a battle of wills, but its outcome was decided by an innovation in empathy. Every great idea begins as an act of defiance against impossibility. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world?